Okay. Well, hello and welcome back to our Sustainability Summit. My name is Mark Hand. I'm the GreenGov Director, and I'm happy that you could join us for the second day in a row. Today's presentation is on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and it's presented by our friends and colleagues at Penn State University today. Thank you for joining us, and looking forward to continuing the conversation on sustainability through this year's Sustainability Week. Just wanted to mention that we do have Spanish translation available for you again today. Please utilize that. At the bottom of your screen, you can click the three dots and find the translation. Today's webinar will be recorded. It is being recorded. I'm sure you noticed. Our presentation team today will plan to set aside plenty of time at the end for question and answer, and hopefully we can have a nice, robust Q&A session here at the end. Plenty of time to do that. So let's get started on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, 192 nations adopted the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is a framework of 17 goals with 169 definable targets to ensure a sustainable future for all by 2030. The goals identify both social, environmental, economic aspects of sustainability that must be achieved. And today we will hear and discuss where Pennsylvania stands on these goals. So I'm going to introduce Peter Voger now. Peter is an assistant director for community engagement at Penn State's Sustainability Institute. He is responsible for helping the Sustainability Institute articulate and implement its vision for community engagement, integrating the university's sustainability initiatives with these needs and goals of community and campus partners throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Peter holds a PhD in environmental studies from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, with a focus on environmental media and history. He also has a master's in environmental studies focused on environmental education from the University of Wisconsin as well, and a bachelor's in history focused on environmental history from Princeton University. For GreenGov, Peter has been our key partner in expanding sustainability programming to our GreenGov stakeholders via the GreenGov and Penn State Sustainability Series that we've had now for a couple years. We are now in our fourth sustainability webinar series with Penn State. That series starts actually Friday next week and runs into the spring of 2023, which covers a variety of sustainability topics with experts in the field that are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals and how we need to progress. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Peter and welcome Peter and thank you for your partnership.
And thank you, Mark, so much. And thank you all for joining us today. We're really delighted to have everybody here for day two on what hopefully many of you attended yesterday's Sustainability Summit and agreed there's just so many amazing programs happening and opportunities for partnerships and thinking about where we can partner and work together and find synergies across government, education, non-governmental organizations, and wherever you fit into that category, whether you're a student or you're a government official, we want you to be thinking throughout all of these sessions, where do I fit and what can I be doing? And we hope that you come out of this empowered, because that's really one of the key goals of this summit. And in our partnership that Mark mentioned that we've now had for over 3 years with the GreenGov Council, that's really been a key part for both of us, because we both serve similar roles in our institutions. We like to say the Sustainability Institute at Penn State isn't the owner of sustainability. There's only 9 of us, and we have 130,000 people at Penn State and 24 campuses. There's no way 9 of us in our office could do sustainability for everybody. But our job is to connect people and to catalyze conversations and get things going, and to help empower everybody else at Penn State to be a sustainable champion. And similarly, the GreenGov Council can't do it by themselves for the entire state government, although you've seen all the great partners that they have been able to catalyze. Their job is to bring people together and help us all learn from each other across state government. So we have very similar missions, and that's in our missions, this is what we've been trying to accomplish with these webinars. And so we're delighted to keep that going today. And as Mark mentioned, with the series that will be starting again next Friday. Just a quick note, if you are a student here for this Meal Ethical Leadership Challenge, we will put up the QR code at the end. And we do encourage you to, if you haven't already, sign up for the remaining Lunch and Learns this week and for the webinar series that starts next Friday. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, who I have known for 4 years as a colleague and now have the great privilege to have as a boss. Lara Fowler is the Interim Chief Sustainability Officer at Penn State University and the Interim Director of the Sustainability Institute, as well as a Professor of Teaching at Penn State Law and affiliate faculty at the Penn State School of International Affairs. Lara is an attorney and mediator whose career has focused on environmental energy and natural resource law, with a specific focus on water-related issues. During the last 10 years, her work at Penn State has focused on questions related to water, and that includes flood, drought, and water quality, agriculture, and energy. She teaches courses on water law, energy, negotiation and dispute resolution design, and mediation of environmental and public conflicts. In addition, she is a member of the Chesapeake Bay Program Science and Technical Advisory Committee and a juror for the Stockholm International Water Institute's Junior Water Prize. Prior to joining Penn State, Lara was an attorney at Gordon Thomas Honeywell LLP in Seattle, Washington, where she focused on mediation and dispute resolution of complex natural resource issues and represented clients facing regulatory hurdles in the environmental and energy fields. She has worked on issues such as who is entitled to store groundwater in the greater Los Angeles basin, flooding issues in Washington State's second largest river basin, and energy issues in the Pacific Northwest. Before pursuing her legal career, she was a senior water resources coordinator with the Oregon Water Resources Department. And Lara has a JD from the University of Washington School of Law and an undergraduate degree from Dartmouth College. I think you'll agree, just listening to that resume, that it's an incredible wealth of knowledge that she brings. And we have found at the Sustainability Institute that she is an amazing champion for helping us see the big picture and see the interconnections. And so I can't think of a more perfect speaker to talk about that with the Sustainable Development Goals. Please join me in welcoming Lara Fowler.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for the warm welcome. Let's see. And I will go ahead and share my screen here. What I wanted to do today was to sort of set the stage for some of the conversations, but also build on the conversation that was taking place yesterday, really thinking what's the opportunities for creating a sustainable future for people, Pennsylvania, and the planet, and opportunities to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'll walk through what the Sustainable Development Goals are, some of what's happening here with them in Pennsylvania, but also reflect a little bit on yesterday's discussion. My goal is to allow plenty of time for questions and answers. I will, hopefully Peter and others can help me run the chat. Will note that there was a question about the PDH credits in the chat, and hopefully somebody else can help answer that because I cannot. Peter noted that I have a number of different official titles. I think they all come down to how do we help people actually better find solutions and get them implemented on the ground. So with that, I've been fascinated actually over the last number of years of watching the development of the Sustainable Development Goals and then the implementation. Probably my most favorite recent article was actually in Japan, where people are wearing, if you look at this lower right, this colorful circle is in imitation of the Sustainable Development Goals, that is being used and articulated in lots of different places by average everyday citizens. We are not there in Pennsylvania yet, but what are they? They were adopted, as noted earlier by Mark, in 2015 by 192 nations. This is the same year leading up to the Paris climate discussions, but part and parcel of that was to figure out what are the opportunities for really thinking about sustainable development. What's a shared blueprint for people, peace, prosperity, and a healthy planet by 2030? And how do we get there? There are 17 different goals. And I'll walk you through each one of them. Goal number 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Goal number 2, end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Goal 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Goal 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Goal 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Goal 8, promote sustained, inclusive, sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Goal 9, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. And I keep going. Goal 10, how do we reduce inequality within and among countries? Goal 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Goal 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Goal 13, climate action, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. Goal 14 is life below water, conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, marine, and resources for sustainable development. Goal 15 is life on land, protect and restore and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Goal 16 is actually one of my favorites, peace, justice, and strong institutions. How do we promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels? And then 17 brings it all together. What are the partnerships for the goals? How do we strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnerships for sustainable development? Each of these has underlying them measurable targets. I pulled this up as water is my favorite example. This is the one I've worked with most closely, right? There's targets on how do we ensure that we have safe and affordable drinking water, ending open defecation and providing access to sanitation and hygiene. Target 6.3, improving water quality, wastewater treatment, and safe reuse. Target 4, increasing water use efficiency and ensuring freshwater supplies. Target 6.5, implementing integrated water resource management. And my favorite under all of this, there's sub-targets. 6.5.2 is looking at, for example, transboundary water cooperation, just as an example. And the last target, 6.6, protecting and restoring water-related ecosystems. You could lose yourself deeply in the sustainable development goals and the targets and so forth. But what's that really mean? I'll give you another example. Good health and well-being, a sub-target is how do we substantially reduce the number of deaths and illnesses from hazardous chemicals, air, water, and soil pollution contamination. And the cartoon on the right is from the United Nations Environment Program. We're really looking at improving or affecting energy. Energy is a huge source of air pollution. So can you really look at greening the system? So on the upper left here, environmental factors kill millions of people every year, causing millions of deaths worldwide. Can we avoid and reduce pollution such that we're actually preventing millions of premature deaths, particularly for more vulnerable populations? Kids, people with suppressed immune systems, elders, and so forth. Pollution, chemical exposure, climate change, and ultraviolet radiation contribute to about 100 different kinds of diseases, again, really affecting young children and elderly people. Can we work to create a healthier environment that, again, keeps us healthy in the first place? Air pollution is the largest environmental health, killing about 6.5 million people prematurely per year. And what we saw over the last couple of years of COVID is underlying background pollution levels are a multiplier, a threat multiplier, if you will, for already vulnerable conditions. Again, in adopting cleaner energy, both indoor and outdoor air pollution, can we clean that up to really be thinking about healthy and sustainable communities? So I'm going to walk through some examples of this, but digging a little bit deeper, the idea is that these are a blueprint, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, really recognize the need that we have to make progress with all of them to make progress with any of them. That normally we kind of consider these systems in isolation, but that our economy, our society, and our world really depend on each other, right? The biodiversity of the globe really depends on integration of how we're really thinking about it, and vice versa. Our economy, at the end of the day, fundamentally depends on the areas that we live in. Several years ago, Carbon County, Pennsylvania, actually did a return on the environment report of really looking at what the economic basis for their society was based on the environment in Carbon County. I recommend that report highly, and maybe somebody can add it to the chat while we're talking through. But it was a really innovative look at instead of the return on the economy, kind of turning it around to saying, hey, we depend on the biosphere, and this is what this does for us all the way through the system. So we think about people, again, can we end poverty and hunger in all forms and ensure dignity and equality? Can that help lead us to prosperity and fulfilling lives in harmony with nature, not overseeing it, not dominating it, but in partnership with it? Can that then in turn help with peace to foster peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, working together through a solid global partnership in a way that helps protect our planet's natural resources and climate for current and future generations? One of the things that I found really heartening about the Sustainability Summit yesterday, a little bit overwhelming in conferring with a colleague who's on yesterday and today, was there was a lot there. How do we take all of this and the opportunities and kind of move it forward? One of the reasons that I like the Sustainable Development Goals is it can meet you where you are. I happen to be and have worked for a long time in the water space. And it's easy to see kind of what those networks are to other areas. But if I start with water, I can think of cooperation and partnerships. I can think of energy. I can think of food. So lots of different linkages that kind of lead and connect together. And that may be something that comes out of the Sustainability Summit, and that I'd love to come out of the discussions, is how do we find that path forward, again, for more sustainable development here in Pennsylvania? So where is Pennsylvania now? In 2018, they did an original rankings based on the Sustainable Development Goals, and Pennsylvania didn't do very well at the time. We are still not doing great. We are 29th out of 50 states, and one of just 19 states not on target to reach any of our goals by 2030. That's not really where I want to dwell. I want to dwell more on the opportunities. But if you really think about Pennsylvania, we are the third largest producer in the country overall, the second largest producer of natural gas, the third largest supplier of coal and electricity. And not included in that is that we are I think the second or third largest exporter internationally of coal. We are very much contributing to carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. We are the fourth largest emitter of carbon dioxide in the United States, and about 1% of global emissions. We're responsible too, if you look at it, and again, Peter mentioned that I'm on the Chesapeake Bay Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee. You cannot solve the questions of the Chesapeake Bay and the eutrophication of the bay without thinking about Pennsylvania. We're about 69% of the nitrogen coming in. We're in need of reducing our nitrogen by about 69%. And a lot of that's an agricultural focus, right? So we're not where we would like to be in the state rankings, nor are we necessarily on track, but not all is lost here. This is just a closer look at the total carbon dioxide emissions, and you see where we are behind Texas, California, Florida, and we are number 4. The United States is a big contributor globally. If you look at the lifetime emissions since 1850, the US is the largest contributor. On a year by year, we are behind China right now. So it matters what we do, and it matters what we do here in Pennsylvania. Peter mentioned that I teach energy law, and I'm always struck when I'm teaching energy law how often Pennsylvania was the first oil well, Oil City, Pennsylvania, the first nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania, the first nuclear power disaster, Pennsylvania. It goes on. And I had no idea before we came to Pennsylvania 10 years ago, just what an energy state Pennsylvania is, which is, again, both a challenge, but also an opportunity. If you look at the Sustainable Development Report overall, there were a number of key messages that came out of it, right? We are not improving as all of our states quickly enough to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. 20% of indicators in every state are going in the wrong direction. This is the bad news slide. We have inequalities deeply entrenched across the United States, also not a surprise. COVID made this abundantly clear, including the need for universal health coverage, universal access to key social and physical infrastructure. I think in places where you had not only COVID, but then more recent disasters layered on, you can really see how vulnerable our systems are right now. Environmental justice questions both show a path forward through Black and Indigenous and other excluded community-led efforts. People are making progress, and it's sometimes those excluded entities that are actually finding a way forward. We also have a huge issue with data gaps, time lags, and the lack of disaggregated data. We need improvements in statistical capacity, new approaches to monitor how we're achieving this. But in looking at this report, I think one of the points that really came home is the changes that we need to actually achieve these goals need to be bold and courageous. That action is only possible through collaboration. That bolding is mine. And I think that really resonates with what I was hearing yesterday. We, in fact, need to be building those partnerships. We need to be collaborating, and business as usual is not enough, right? So part of me says, all right, game on, challenge accepted. What do we do to develop our workforce? How do we think about education? How do we reach people from kids all the way through to really think about the just, equitable, fair, and sustainable society that we want? Right? What comes next? So looking a little closer at Pennsylvania, this is a complicated chart. This is the Sustainable Development Goal dashboard and trend for Pennsylvania. Anything in green is good. We have no green. Anything in yellow is challenges remain. Anything in orange, we have significant challenges remaining. And in red, major challenges remaining. Gray is information is unavailable. Down below, you have the trends. A green upward arrow is on track for maintaining, on track or maintaining the Sustainable Development Goal achievement for the state. A slightly sideways arrow is moderately improving. A completely sideways arrow is stagnating. A down arrow is decreasing, or it's not available. So we're kind of in place or going down in a number of areas, but there are a number of areas where we have improved over the last 4 years. And just a note for the moderator, I am picking up some background noise. If you can mute everybody, that would be great. Thanks. So areas where we have improved over the last 4 years, air pollution levels have, including reduced lead level emissions, nitrous oxide emissions, and sulfate emissions have gone down in part for changes over through the Clean Air Act. Pennsylvania has been joining climate alliances and help moving things forward. As was noted yesterday, Pittsburgh actually hosted the first, I think, national or international green energy discussion last week. Lots of work on managing invasive species, thinking about elderly food security, addressing housing evictions, and that may have been part of the freezes that were put in place during COVID. These numbers may be starting to shift a little bit. We've increased the population with a college degree, access to career and technical training, and high school graduation rates, while decreasing the youth incarceration rates. On the health side, deaths due to road collisions have gone down, and injuries and fatalities due to weather have also decreased. So it's an interesting snapshot to see what's on that. We haven't seen a ton of progress, but again, on those individual areas, particularly programs led by state government, have been making some progress. So where are we now? Peter and I, in talking about this, we could dwell on the bad news, but I think it's actually an opportunity for optimism. There's so many potentials for innovations, for thinking about this, that we're a microcosm, particularly with our Rust Belt cities, with our rural communities, of thinking about how do we really address some of these questions? What are the opportunities economically, geographically, and politically? Again, if we're responsible for 4% of US emissions and 1% of global emissions, can we make progress at home? It's a little bit of the old phrase of act locally, think globally, but we really do have the opportunity to impact what's happening across the whole globe by what we're doing here. Can we be a model on how to get things done? Cristiana Figueres was the woman who helped broker the Paris Climate Agreement, and she and a colleague wrote a book called What's the Future We Want? So I'm borrowing their phrase. We have a ton of innovative programs and opportunities. Can we really help think through and help our communities and institutions reduce their emissions and increase their resilience? An absolutely critical need is bridging these capacity needs. Last week, the Local Government Advisory Committee for the Chesapeake Bay program hosted a whole session on resilience. And I think what I see right now is we have a ton of federal money coming down and a ton of local need. And in between, juggling, we'll call it the valley of death, right? We need to bridge that, and we need resources. And that may not be money, but it may be people, it may be training, it may be sharing those stories and best practices on how to get things done. I think the Sustainable Development Goals are actually useful as a tool to help us visualize and track both the potential, but also the implementation as we go forward. So a couple of examples of really thinking of combining these different things. How do we see new challenges, but also the possibilities for implementing? Good health, for example. Can we think about clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, sustainable communities, and climate action all combined together to help our communities be more resilient, healthier, more productive? So, for example, climate change and heat are predicted to cause hog and chicken industries, confined animal feeding operations from North Carolina and Virginia to potentially relocate to Pennsylvania. What does that do to our handling of surface water quality, agricultural needs, increased runoff, and so forth? But can we start planning now to address those industries and continue to make progress both on our nutrient runoffs, protecting the Chesapeake Bay watershed, but also the Delaware or the Ohio, where they have similar related questions? What about thinking through developing green infrastructure in different communities, again, to address clean water and sanitation? Can we make our green spaces grow to help our towns and communities be more attractive, be more livable, but also address some of the stormwater questions and the health-related questions? I want to play a short video. This is from Water Blues Green Solutions. This is a film done several years ago from the Pennsylvania WPSU, which is an affiliate here. And hopefully, let me just, if I'm going to check the volume. If I'm not sharing the volume, please let me know. Short film that just highlights the benefits, mutual benefits of different kinds of programs coming together.
Educate.
Just a quick sound check. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks.
The public about managing stormwater includes reaching out to parents, teachers, and students at local schools. With financial help from the Water Department, Greenfield Elementary, in the heart of Philadelphia, was one of the first schools in the city to redesign its schoolyard to prevent stormwater runoff.
The schoolyard was completely all asphalt. There was 2 large green dumpsters that would ooze trash muck on a daily basis. So when it would rain, those pollutants would run into the stormwater system and run out to the Schuylkill River.
My hands are wet.
There's now a play space for kids that actually is a play space and not a parking lot. In addition, the water percolates down through the semi-permeable surface and is diverted by these mounds that allow the water to percolate through instead of running out and into the storm drain and out to the river.
Parents really drove the process, and we were able to team up with the water department. They saw us as a good pilot project because we had a motivated group of parents and teachers to set an example for everyone else. The schoolyard now is about 50% porous, including 2 rain gardens and an agriculture zone.
Another beetle grub. Oh, another one.
We also use it as an educational outdoor classroom.
We have 4 beetle grubs. That's awesome.
So teachers will bring classes out here to work on various different projects.
When we come out tomorrow, we're going to collect all the samples. We're going to take a good look at what we have.
Once they put the gardens in, we had soil, we had trees, organisms started showing up. We started migrating outside and using all of the gardens as part of the science lab.
You eat beetle larvae?
No.
Has 2 legs per body segment, so what's it going to be?
Now that we have the gardens, we just have everything we really need here, and we don't have to go to other places. Now we can just use our own environment as science.
So many small changes we can make have such a large impact. Just by doing a small urban garden, the amount of water you can absorb and then enhance your environment is incredible. So the more awareness we can raise through our kids and through our teachers and our community of what really should be common sense. And sometimes we get stuck in a rut, not realizing that we're accepting something that could easily be changed and improved.
One of the things that I really love about this film, and there's a whole series of actually short films on this website and different stories, but how much it builds and connects good health and well-being, quality education, clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities, and again, peace, justice, and strong institutions, probably more, access to food and so forth. So can we really think about ways of connecting things that we might not have thought about? Can we start to stack the benefits of a project where it was like, how do we have a better playground for kids with more trees, but it also combines all of these things? We're seeing a lot of challenges with climate change, increasing, for example, ozone and allergens, making it harder to be outside, increasing the summer mortality from heat stress. But can we really think about planting trees in the right places and building parks to mitigate the urban heat island effect? Really can make a huge difference in areas, 2 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit, while improving air quality, making things much more livable. So how do we start to reach those combined actions that really make a difference? Are there other innovative solutions to help address multiple health challenges and non-health challenges, right? If you think about electricity generation, it's about 33% of Pennsylvania's greenhouse gases. If we reduce by using solar, can we cut those greenhouse gas emissions by quite a bit and increase or improve air quality? Again, picking up a little bit of background noise, so let the moderators deal with that. Can we deal with some of the energy-related questions and address some of the other air pollution questions that I showed a little bit in the comic earlier? Breathing issues, neurological damage, heart attacks, and cancer. The more I'm talking with colleagues at the College of Medicine and the College of Nursing, the more people are realizing the absolutely huge impact that air pollution has on a whole range of health issues. Improving our economy, improving our air also helps improve health. How do we help, again, communities that may be beset by asthma, that maybe the fence line communities actually improve their living conditions on a day-to-day basis? Can we generate green jobs, new high-paying jobs while redeveloping blighted brownfields and/or abandoned industrial sites? Can we combine those legacy impacts and clean them up? I don't have a clip of it, but one of my favorite films is called A River Reborn, about the Conemaugh River in the Little Conemaugh in the Johnstown area. And again, I'll put a link to it in the chat, but it shows how they basically cleaned up acid mine drainage in that particular area, restored the Little Conemaugh, and produced actually local economic development, improved well-being, a more sustainable recreational opportunity, and put people back to work. An amazing combination of different things. So lots of connections through all of the sustainable development goals, but it's not necessarily changing what you work on, but how you frame it, right? Can we build these connections in different ways to find different partners, different funding opportunities to really move both Pennsylvania and therefore the planet into more prosperous and resilient future? Can we think big about this, right? A recent study basically said, look, if we move 90% of the grid to renewable energy, we can do it at no net cost over time while decreasing electricity costs by 13% and alleviating, again, 1.2 trillion in health and environmental damages, 85,000 premature deaths. That's a stunning set of numbers. An estimate for every dollar spent on energy transitions to renewables, it's $3 to $7 in payoff. Penn State just invested in solar energy. We expected a payback period of about 12 and a half years. And I think we're going to see it much, much faster than we expected. Can we think Pennsylvania as the leader in this transition of really reducing electrical costs for Pennsylvania consumers, generating jobs, revitalizing our brownfield and damaged sites, and maybe harvesting energy in a different way? But how do we do so in a way, again, that's a just and fair transition of addressing questions of poverty, income inequality, infrastructure, water quality, and some of these other concerns? And can we start small to go bigger? Sorry, the animation's not completely intact here, but the left animation or the left picture is New Kensington at our campus. There launched a downtown sustainability stroll where they were tying businesses and sustainability goals together for a strategy. Here's the animation that's supposed to go with this title: Different Conversation on Water and Agriculture. is that we've been fostering in partnership with state government a series of conversations called Pennsylvania in the Balance. 2016, we pulled a number of people reluctantly together who were basically, how do we have healthy, good water quality and healthy and productive agriculture? And I love this quote from somebody afterwards where a conference participant said, I was really reluctant to come into this discussion, but this makes it feel like we can all pull together and make things better for the watershed and the Chesapeake Bay. It's otherwise a very lonely feeling that we're in this alone and to blame for what has happened. You don't normally pull together a meeting for 3.5 days and have people want to stay longer, but we had to shoo people out. And we're working on a redo of this conference this December to really think about implementing better water quality actions across the Chesapeake Bay in Pennsylvania. Our steering committee is about 25 people, and everyone's like, this was a watershed moment and a watershed opportunity to bridge what have typically been different groups of people into one place and find a solution and a pathway forward. So key opportunities or set of opportunities, a goal of this summit is to build partnerships to really address these goals, to work at larger scales and across silos, to build capacity, leverage funding, and build connections and learn from each other's successes and best practices. Lots of potential partners out there. And I guess, in thinking about my colleagues' concern about, this is kind of overwhelming, my suggestion is start where you are. Start with what you love or where you're connected, and start to have those local conversations. Colleague Catherine Hayhoe, who's a climate scientist, she was at Texas Tech and is now with the Nature Conservancy, says start with what you love and start talking about it. There are far more people and far more groups working in this method to try to bring people together. Can we start those snowballs rolling to build up our momentum? Partnering with local universities or colleges, extension agents, nonprofits, non-governmental organizations. Yesterday, at the end of the day, UPMC hosted a discussion with Penn State Health about climate resilience. So hospitals and public health organizations, there's tons of work in that space, and they're all like, this is not really our specialty, but how do we come together? Local school systems and libraries are doing extraordinary work in this space. So are religious communities and houses of worships, hunting, fishing, birding, and outdoor groups, local, state, federal governments, county governments as well, foundations, you name it, right? There's loads and loads of people working in this space. So I welcome any questions. I welcome the conversation. I welcome different resources that you might want to share. I think we've got plenty of time here, but it's, again, when I feel most frustrated or worried about the state of the world, I'm like, I don't have time to worry. Let's roll up our sleeves and get going, and let's see what we can accomplish. So thank you so much for joining us today. And again, welcome questions or comments.
And just a reminder, feel free to put questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and be invited to unmute yourself. I see Tim has put questions in the chat about funding opportunity. What inexpensive methods exist? Do you want to be a little more specific, Tim, about inexpensive methods as to which aspect are you considering? And you should feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask the question directly.
So he notes in the chat, money is not always sustainable, perhaps shouldn't be the focus. Community might be in fact better. I agree. And what I would say is that sometimes it takes the community coming together to be able to identify their needs. And often, sometimes people will say, well, we don't have enough money to do something. And Peter mentioned that I worked as a facilitator in Washington State on a flooding question that was in the Chehalis River Basin. And it was to deal with the fact that that particular area had been hammered by flood in 2007 and again in 2009. And everyone's like, we need money to fix the problem. But nobody could agree on what money or where it should come from or what it should be used for. And everyone's like, but we don't trust the government anyway. If you want to create a flood authority that's just financing, we don't trust you to spend it well. We spent 2.5 years working to come up with a list of potential projects, both small to big, and building that coherence to be able to have those conversations. And yes, some of those projects involved actually spending money. So, for example, somebody is like in 2007, pretty much all of the livestock for the area died in the floods. And one farmer said, look, if I had, kind of a critter pad, a place where the cows could walk themselves up out of harm's way, we would have alleviated a lot of the concerns at the time. So everyone's like, well, I don't really know what a critter pad is. Let's go study it. Let's go look at it. And they came back and said, look, if you actually built small projects in different places, it would in fact alleviate some of the risk and damage. We can't stop the flooding, but we can address the risks of this. Today, they have something like 40 or 45 critter pads across the different basin. And when they flooded in 2022, in January this year, they lost almost no livestock in the whole area. Phenomenal change. Did that take money? Yes. But it also took cooperation and working through those ideas first. So to me, what I am struck by is how much funding is flowing down and what the community needs are. But the real need to work together to identify what the issues are, what the opportunities are, and how to bridge that gap to be able to take advantage of some of the funding that's coming through. We're working with the Borough of Selinsgrove on the Susquehanna River right now on a community flood resilience effort. If Selinsgrove and our community municipalities across the Susquehanna were hit by a flood tomorrow, we are not ready. How do we get ready? How do we identify and bridge, again, those needs with the funding and really find a way forward? That's the space that I see as an opportunity, in part spurred on by the lure of that there is actually financial resources to be had in this space.
I see we have a number of questions coming in the chat. So Tyler says, I work in the Pittsburgh area and primarily in distributing Act 129 funds to qualifying projects. How best can we get past skepticism regarding these programs? Let me tell you, it is hard to give away free money. For things that might be more proactive, it seems even harder.
Yeah, great question. I think a couple different things is, again, building. I think the comment that somebody said yesterday during the discussion really resonated with me. And I can't ask you to trust me. I just ask that you participate and do, right? Roll up your sleeves and give it a try. For smaller organizations, can you partner with other organizations? Peter mentioned that my background is as a mediator and facilitator. I have worked on a number of very, very large projects, enormous projects. And everyone's like, well, okay, how did you get that job? Or how did somebody even start the conversation? And I will tell you that every single one of those big projects has started with a couple of local leaders that I don't know the answer. I don't know the path forward, but would you sit down with me and have a cup of coffee or a beer? There has to be a different way forward. Can we bridge that? So maybe I'm working with a local government entity that has money to give away, and maybe it's reaching out to an entity that could use the money and just saying, can we have a conversation? Can we start to talk through what our commonalities are and how do we bridge this? So the Chehalis River Basin in Washington, the one that I was talking about with flooding, went from we don't trust anybody and we don't want, don't create a taxing authority because we don't trust on it to be done, to having bridged now and come together with their list of projects, their list of needs in a cooperative fashion. They've leveraged now probably about $125 million worth of funding for projects. And they're much more flood resilient than they were 20 years ago. So a small request of, can I have a cup of coffee? Can I start to explore those commonalities, to me is actually really important. I worked in Oregon for a number of years, and in each watershed, there's a watershed group that is helping coordinate and identify needs, opportunities, and leverage those funding sources. It's bottom up. It has taken a number of years to build those, but they are fundamentally in a better shape now than they were 25 years ago when those groups all started. Can we form local community resilience groups that help us leverage these spaces? Is a tremendous opportunity that I see.
And Kathy is saying, I wish an organization like, say, Penn State would compile a list of strategies that are appropriate for various regions across Pennsylvania in terms of trying to address these sustainability challenges. She's envisioning an online tool or app similar to Project Drawdown or the UN SDGs, but that is Pennsylvania specific, and is wondering, is there any tool like this in the works?
Great question. I would love to see it. And I'm certainly seeing other states, for example, Delaware and Maryland both have resilience funding dashboards, which I think are helpful, necessary, but insufficient, right? And so some of the conversations that we've been participating in is also with federal government agencies to say, hey, business as usual on your end isn't going to work either. If you are concerned about an equitable and just transition in our communities, just simply asking poorer, more rural communities to apply for big grant funding isn't the way to do it. But is there a way, again, that we can build that local capacity? Do we have grant writers, circuit writers who can help? You know, and I would give this as a challenge back to our Commonwealth partners, which is we need different systems for bringing people together. Do we offer facilitation help? The work that I did in the Chehalis Basin in Washington State was in part as a facilitator paid for by the governor saying, I want there to be local bottom-up solutions, and I will pay for facilitation help to make sure this happens. So I think that we as an organization, as Penn State, can help to pull some of this information together. I would reference out of North Carolina, the Desire, DSIRE website is a helpful example of clean energy policies that are all in one place. Can we do something similar with resilience? And there is a need for, again, the people on the ground who can help bridge and connect those different groups together. I think it's a yes and. Share information and bridge those communities.
Stephen is asking about boaters and their carbon contributions on Lake Erie, possibility of switching over to electric motors, moving away from the crude oil product at sea as well as on land. Do you have any thoughts on addressing that and protecting maritime resources?
Also a great question. I think that there is a lot of opportunities, again, to meet people where they are. I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine who's a managing partner at a law firm in Portland, Oregon this summer. And his reaction to climate change is, I can't deal with it. It's too overwhelming. I bought a big boat. I feel slightly guilty about it, but I'm going to go out and have a good time because the world's ending. And I thought, oh, wow, if you are a smart and articulate person who cares about this and your reaction is just to throw up your hands, we have a long way to go, was part of my reaction. But my other fascination, we bought an electric chainsaw this past year, and my husband took a chainsaw safety class, and the teacher of that class basically said, just don't get hit by this. The torque on electric chainsaws is so strong that you, in fact, can't wear safety pants strong enough to protect yourself. And it got me really thinking about, if the torque on electric engines is so much stronger, why hasn't snowmobiles electrified, or boats, or some of these other things? Can we start to really think creatively about some of the messaging? This is well out of my personal area of expertise. That said, I am working on a project with the Federal Aviation Administration looking at sustainable aviation fuel. And again, the questions of electrification are enormous in lots of different industries, including aviation. But aviation has said we cannot get there without thinking about sustainable aviation fuel. And to me, that's how do we help our farmers both grow food, but also fuel, and not get into competition with those things? Can we take our waste in the system and turn it into energy through biomass, kind of recovery and other processes? All of these things are so very knit together that there may be ways to electrify the system in all sorts of ways and decrease the potential risk. People have been watching, actually, again, I teach energy law, and have been watching the fact that the Nord Stream pipelines have been apparently sabotaged and blown up. And people have been looking at that and said, if you had a windmill fall into the Baltic Sea, you have better fish habitat, but you don't have an explosive methane leak happening from that, right? So can you change your energy systems and decrease the risk both on land and in water, both of which are sustainable development goals, while improving our health and safety in some ways? So boaters, I think, are an important constituent. Working in the Puget Sound and with the Puget Sound Partnership, they actually had specific environmental programs aimed at boaters to be able to reduce their potential contamination. But it's a space that I think we need to think more about.
I think that's a good example, going back to Lara's point earlier in her talk, of start with non-traditional partners. I mean, lots of people might not think, oh, boaters or marina, that's where I'm going to find a sustainability champion. But having the conversation about, how do you power your boat? Have you thought about different ways? Is there interest? That's where you might find that innovative partnership that you haven't thought about just by staying in the sustainability space. And so that's one of the challenges that the SDG offers, is really thinking about those partnerships and thinking, where do I go to find the people who aren't engaged, and maybe aren't engaged for the same reasons I am, but we have the same ultimate goal, even if we're working from different values or different reasons for that goal.
Yeah, and I would add to that, what brings people to the table in the borough of Selinsgrove as we're talking with them, local economic development and access to recreation, flood resilience, connectivity to the river. The river is beautiful most of the time, when it's not in flood. We actually hosted a flood resilience fest this spring when the river was headed towards flood stage. It's the first time I've looked at a hydrograph on whether or not we should hold an event to figure out if we were actually going to get flooded out. But bringing different partners together with different values and different interests, to me, is an opportunity highlighted by the Sustainable Development Goals, but also out of yesterday's discussion, which is how do we do more better together, and what's it take to build those partnerships? And I would love to see, one of the things that's been so interesting with this role or set of roles that I have in the university is, how do we foster those kinds of discussions? Can we convene people together to think through what are challenging questions, but also great opportunities? I mentioned the PA and the balance discussion, where it was really hard to get people in the room in the first place, and then they didn't want to leave afterwards. It's invigorating and energizing, actually, I think, to start to find those solutions. And I think that's one of the challenges, I would say, is how do we share the good work that's happening? In the Chehalis Basin, when things were going terribly, the newspaper was there every day and they covered it every day. And as soon as things started to go well, we had to write our own stories. We had to put out press releases saying, actually, we're still making progress on this, what this looks like. So how do we actually share our success stories and let people know what we're doing? And that would be something I'd love to see come out of this sustainability conference here.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. If anybody has questions they want to put in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, I'd love to get one last question in.
Lara, I was going to say, at the state level, Matt and I have set up a sustainability teams template, which uses the UN Sustainable Development Goals for the framework. And one of the things that we found working with 30+ agencies is that utilizing the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals to establish your team has been helpful for many, because I think, at least in agency land, in our perspective, agencies are doing a lot of great work, but they don't necessarily always recognize that they're a part of, the larger sustainability effort. So I think for us, some of that's just recognizing our role in all of this and then connecting the dots to the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I see Carolyn has raised her hand. If you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, Carolyn.
Thank you. Quick question for you. I work for Child Unlimited and we do cold water conservation. And I'm trying to track life below water here in Pennsylvania, and I haven't been able to find any data on it. Is there a better place to be looking than like the Fitzgerald map?
A great question, and that would be one where I think I don't know the immediate answer to that, but certainly happy to follow up with you. And we can jot our contact information in the chat. So for anybody, happy to follow up and dig into this a little bit more. I have colleagues working on questions like that at Penn State. I just don't know the data sources off the top of my head.
And
that would be great, because we can actually provide the data and with our organization, because we've been tracking it, but we haven't seen what's already been done.
And one slightly confusing thing about the SDGs is that life below water specifically refers to oceanic ecosystems, that they count terrestrial freshwater ecosystems under SDG 15. So there may be some confusion as to where the data is being collated. It would be under SDG 15, life on land, rather than SDG 14, life below water.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, and what I would say, perhaps in closing, is that thinking very locally and working with local groups and finding partnerships and bridging this space, to me, that leads to a ton of optimism, and we can do this. People, I think, are really hungry for ways to contribute and belong. I reached out to a number of students on Saturday and said, you know, hey, I got a request to go plant trees at a nearby farm. Are you interested? And oh, by the way, there's 50% chance of an edge of a hurricane hitting us, and it's going to be wet. I only had one person drop. We had 22 people come out to plant trees on Saturday morning, and their request was, when can we do this again? Right? People, I think, are very hungry to engage, but kind of don't know how sometimes. But offering up opportunities of helping think creatively, of coming together, again, from people's passion, their interest, can be, I think, the fuel really to move this forward. And in our role at the Sustainability Institute at Penn State, we are looking for partners. We're thinking about workforce development. We're thinking about how do we communicate what's happening, coordinate, and really catalyze action in a way across the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so we can be an example of beyond. And I'm super heartened by the conversation yesterday. Happy to engage further.
Green team member.
And so I think somebody is unmuted, but just quickly want to share for those students who are here from SMEAL, we want to make sure that you get your QR code. And then I'll turn it back over to Mark to close this out. But please join me in first thanking Lara Fowler for the presentation, and we look forward to seeing the webinars going forward. So, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lara. That was a fantastic presentation, and it's given us a lot to think about for sure. I just wanted to remind folks that we have more to come. We have sustainability presentations throughout the rest of the week through Lunch and Learns. We have on October 5th, we have DGS that's going to be, the secretary will be joining us, and we'll be discussing diversity in small business opportunities and how that can be leveraged to make communities stronger. On Thursday, October 6th, we will have the Department of Environmental Protection Secretary joining the Conservation and Natural Resources staff and to talk about this very issue of partnerships and what Lara was talking about with resilient communities and greenways and things like that she discussed in her presentation. As we can connect the dots with what DCNR is doing through partnerships. And on Friday, October 7th is an important topic for me. Correctional Industries has some fantastic inmate training and reentry programs, and there's ways that it's really great to hear what Correctional Industries is doing to give inmates a second chance and getting folks out of the correctional system and back into into work in Pennsylvania. And so please do join us for these remaining sessions this week. And again, you see the SMEAL College of Business QR code, so you can scan for credit. And I believe that's it. Lara, do you have any final words before we part?
Just a big thank you for taking the time to join us here today. And thanks for organizing this overall seminar both yesterday and the series this week.
Okay, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.